So, welcome to the astrology interview, and I'm very excited to have Chris Mitchell with me today because he's going to be talking about a subject that I'm increasingly being fascinated by, which is medieval astrological history. So, Chris is an expert in medieval. He likes this because he's got a Leo rising, and he's a tutor on the MA Cultural Astrology and Astronomy and Astrology course, and he's also got his PhD in a some mad medieval manuscript with a with a chart in it, and he's learnt Latin to do it. I don't know, Chris, you're amazing. So anyway, welcome. So today what we want to talk about really is sort of this sense of in medieval times there was tension between the church and astrology, but people were using astrology a lot in all sorts of different ways. But I was very interested that they also used it to measure life expectancy. So could we just, where would you like to start with all of this?
Well, I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting me, Sue, and it's lovely to catch up again. Yes, it's interesting because, of course, if you go back a couple of thousand years to the height of the Roman Empire, I live in Leicester in the Midlands, which is a Roman city. You live near Bath, another Roman
Yeah.
city, and astrology was just being done on a day-to-day basis. Nobody really thought anything about it. It was Hellenistic astrology. Hellenistic astrology we think of as Greek, but Greece was part of
Yes.
the Roman Empire, and Roman soldiers could take their oaths in Latin or Greek. All the Roman scholars knew Greek as well as they did Latin. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations in Greek, even though he was Roman. The Emperor Hadrian of Hadrian's Wall used to do his own solar return every year. So astrology was mainstream. The early Christians were a bit skeptical of it because of two reasons. One, it was Roman, and obviously the planets were associated with gods, plural, which conflicted with the
Mm.
idea of only one god. And also, it was the everybody knew that the motions of the planets were regular and predictable, which implied there was no free will. If everything's controlled by the planets, well, you don't have the option of choosing or rejecting Christ, and that basically messes up the whole concept of Christianity. So they were very skeptical of it. But there were cracks in that objection right from the very beginning because the most important festival in Christianity is Easter, of course, which is coming up now. And Easter is unusual because if I say to you, when's Christmas Day going to be in the year 2030, you know the answer, 25th of December.
Yeah.
If I say, when's Good Friday in 2030, you probably don't know off the top of your head.
You have to have an ephemeris.
You do, and or you need to know that it's the first full moon. The Easter Day is the first full moon after the spring equinox, or sorry, first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox. And early Christians, well, early scholars generally had a bit of trouble measuring the exact date of the equinox. The early church thought it was the 25th of March. And they called it Ladies' Day because, of course, 25th of March fits in nicely with 25th of December. And so 25th of March must be when the Virgin Mary got pregnant with by God to give birth to Jesus. We're assuming that divine gestation periods are the same as
Yes,
human ones, but
yes.
there you go.
Yeah.
It was also the day when you had to pay your taxes. That was the tax return date. And a little aside here, in 1752, when we changed calendar and dropped 11 days, the trader said, we're not paying our taxes early. So the Inland Revenue said, all right, then we'll make it April the 5th and move it. And that's why our tax year is April the 5th to this day. But I digress
You
because
do.
the early church needed to know how to calculate Easter. And the Gospels say that Christ was crucified on the eve of Passover. That doesn't mean the evening of Passover. It's like Christmas Eve is the day
Yeah. It's
before
day
that, New
before.
Year's Eve, the day before Passover. And in the Jewish calendar, Passover is always the 15th day, lunar day of spring, of Nisan, which is the first month of spring. And Jewish scholars knew how to calculate this, and that was fine. And early Christians said, yeah, all right, then we'll celebrate Easter on the 14th of this lunar month, the day before the full moon. And that was fine. But the early Christians, as they got stronger, didn't want to do what the Jews were doing because that was a different religion. So they actually made it, well, basically a kind of clerical crime to celebrate it on the same day that the Jews celebrated Passover. So they needed to understand how full moons and new moons worked. So they already had to do a bit of astronomy to work it out. Because whereas at the time, Jewish people could just look out of the window and go, right, I can see a new moon in Jerusalem, that's the first of the month. You couldn't do that for Easter because you need several weeks' notice so you can have Lent before Easter. So they
Yes.
needed to know the maths to do it. And this was a really tricky subject called computus, calculation. And monks spent ages working out how to do this. There were sometimes disagreements, different formulae, and so on. But by the 700s, the Venerable Bede had really said, okay, look, this is how you do it. And he worked out formula, and monks were learning all this, and it become pretty much set. So Christians knew how to do Easter. So early Christians, like Augustine, people like that, they didn't like the idea of astrology to divine the mind of God and try and predict the future, but they were quite happy to use it to predict when Easter was going to be, because that was essential. And they also didn't mind it being used for when to plant crops, forecasting weather, and that was called natural astronomy, because the word astronomy and astrology were the same thing in
Mm.
those days. So natural astronomy was fine, weather forecasting, sowing your crops,
Did they
working
use
out
it for
Easter.
medicine? They think they used it in medicine
They
to work
did, and
out
medicine was fine
Jewish.
as well. Yep, certain
Yeah,
herbs are going to be better in a full moon, and certain herbs
yeah.
in a new moon, and so on. That was fine. What they didn't like was what they called judicial astrology, which is making judgments from it,
Mm.
telling your fortune or doing your natal chart or your solar return or anything like that. That was taboo. And that really persisted right up until the 10th century. Christianity was opposed to it. And it wasn't done out of a place of ignorance. I mean, Augustine used to be an astrologer. He used to do his own charts. He knew how to cast charts. And he said, well, it's not actually blasphemous, but we shouldn't be doing it because it kind of touches into dangerous areas.
Mm.
And he also said, and also I've come to the conclusion it's a load of rubbish because identical twins have the same chart but often turn out different. And they definitely have the same conception time. So it can't work. So he had a logical argument and a theological argument. But what happened after that was Christianity became very opposed to anything pagan. And the Roman Empire became Christian, split into two. The Western Empire kind of focused more on learning Latin, and they kind of lost Greek. So it wasn't that they smashed up all the science books or anything like that. It's just that they lost the ability to be able to read Greek texts in the West. The Eastern Empire was a bit different. You've got the Emperor Justinian. They're still reading Greek texts and they can read some of these astrological things. But Justinian was very unhappy, not with astrologers as such, but with heretics. And in order to persecute heretics and Jews, he issued a decree that said you're not allowed to learn any of this Greek nonsense. And so astrology, a pagan nonsense. And so astrologers were kind of collateral damage in a way. And a lot of them moved east to Persia because they were much more
Mm.
sympathetic to astrology. The religion there, Zoroastrianism, the battle between light and dark, fitted in very well. There were no problems there. So a lot of these Greek speaking scholars went over to Persia, and that was fine. But a century after that, the Islamic armies, well, Islam arose in Arabia, and then they managed to conquer the mighty Persian Empire. It was quite extraordinary, really. And these new Arab rulers weren't interested in these foreign pagan arts, but they didn't bother persecuting them. It was just like, well, we're not interested in that. We're going to promote Arabic culture. But a bit later, the Persians got a bit upset that, well, we're all Muslims now. We're all supposed to be part of this ummah, the community. But Arabs seem to be like first class citizens, and we Persians have been treated like second class citizens. And the Umayyad dynasty was overthrown by the Abbasids, which were ruled by mostly Persians. And then they got very interested in all these Greek pagan arts because it's like, well, they might be pagan, but if it's going to tell me how to build a better catapult or a better weapon and things like that, then these things are useful. So astrology became really mainstream across the Islamic world in Persia, in Iraq, and so
Is
on.
is this the time called the Islamic golden years or the golden time?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
this is Abu Mashar and all of that lot,
Yes.
who in Baghdad. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And it's interesting because when they founded Baghdad, the caliph there, who was an Arab, Al Mansur, he was living in Iraq, wanted to found his new capital city, Baghdad. So he got a team of astrologers to elect the best
yeah.
time to set the foundation stone. And they weren't all Arabs. I mean, one of those was Masha Allah. And although that sounds a very Arabic name, Masha Allah was actually a Persian Jew.
Ah,
So it was very multicultural. It was a real
yeah,
melting pot. They even had people from India involved in these things. So Arabic astrology tended to be, well, we'll take a bit of this pagan Roman Greek astrology and we'll put Indian into the mix and Persian
mm,
into the mix, and it became a huge melting pot. And they used it on a day-to-day basis. They developed it and
amazing.
modified it. And meanwhile, in the West, we'd kind of forgotten all these techniques. So we knew about the zodiac, and you can plant your seeds when it's a new moon and harvest things on a full moon and what have you. But we couldn't cast charts. We'd forgotten how to calculate planetary positions, which they did know in Roman and Greek times. But the Arabs had this knowledge. We'd lost it in the West.
Fascinating, isn't it? So, Chris, let's go move on to, and then obviously it starts to come back because it starts to come back into, I think when it was the sacking of Constantinople, wasn't it? So all the Greek scholars started to come into Europe carrying their Greek texts, and then they got translated. I think that's right, isn't it?
Well, the sack of Constantinople was a bit later. The first one was there were contact because the Muslims had taken over most of Spain. There were contacts
Yes.
between Christians in the north of Spain and Muslims in the
Yeah.
south. And although this was the time of the Crusades and things like this, there were contacts between them. And one of
Mm.
those was a French scholar called Gerbert d'Aurillac, who studied Arabic astrology and astronomy, and he became Pope in the year 999. And he introduced the astrolabe into Europe, into Christian Europe. So Christians suddenly got exposed to all this Arabic stuff, and astrolabes
Yeah.
are really useful instruments for navigating. So that was fine. The church didn't object to that, and particularly as this particular pope was an astrologer, he certainly didn't object. Um, and that opened the door for Arabic astrology coming in. And the subject of my PhD was this huge translation movement in the 12th century where scholars, Toledo fell to the Christians, and that was a major centre of Islamic studies. And Christian scholars fled to Toledo, flocked to Toledo, I should say, not fled,
Mm.
to learn Arabic and
Mm.
translate these Arabic texts into Latin and bring them into Europe. So the 12th century
Incredible.
was this huge renaissance.
Now, Chris, because we want to talk about how they used astrology in those days to measure a lifespan. So, should we move into that now? Because I mean, it's not, I
Absolutely.
mean, God, I could listen to you all day talking about history because it's such an interesting time, and we're just told very much the surface. And of course, it's so much more nuanced and deeper than that. But we can't go into all of that today. So, shall we talk about? Is it the high leg? Is that the right pronounce
Yeah.
it? And
Well,
Alco
or Hillage, it depends. I mean, the trouble with
Hillard.
Arabic words is you can
Okay.
pronounce them anyway, really, and
And
once
I
you translate them
and
into
the
English. Mm,
Alcocoden.
yeah.
So do you want to start introducing that? Because I've only just recently got my head around all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I should say that the reason that length of life is so important is if you join an astrology school today, you sign a code of ethics saying you never ever predict length of life for a client. I mean, that's absolutely taboo. In medieval times, death was all around us. Uh,
Mm,
it you would have 6 or 7 kids because you only expected 2 or 3 of them to make it to adulthood. There were lots of wars, there were lots of diseases, there weren't any vaccines, healthcare wasn't very good, hygiene wasn't very good. So the first thing you would do, and remember in those days, ordinary people couldn't really afford astrologers. By medieval times, you had to be, this was hard work calculating a chart
yeah. Bloody
in
hell.
those days. No computers, not even an ephemeris as we know it. So it was really hard work. And so the first
Did
thing
they
you would
have,
do,
Chris, did they have almanacs back then? I mean,
um,
or not? Was it literally just looking at the skies and plotting the movements of the planets?
They had because these Arabic texts told you how to calculate
Right.
charts, they had that, but it was really, really, really hard work.
Yeah.
I won't go into it.
No.
It's pretty dense maths. But just to give you an example, the first thing you do is you got a day zero, and because these were Arabic texts, that was the day of the Hajj when Muhammad and Abu Bakr went from Mecca to Medina. That's the start of the Islamic calendar. So you want to cast a chart for today. First thing you need to do is how many days is it since the 15th of July, 674 or whatever? Well, you could do it on your fingers, but you'd run out of fingers really quickly.
Yeah.
That's just the first bit before you can even begin. And then you have to do lots of really complicated multiplication. It was hard work, but they could
Yeah.
do it. And so the first thing you would do is the queen's just given birth to a new, a baby. There's no point in telling the king and queen that their child's going to grow up to be a great warrior if the chart says, yeah, actually this baby's going to die before he's one because he won't be able to meet his potential. So it was perfectly normal to say, well, let's make sure the baby doesn't die first because if he does, there's no point in doing a future prognostication for him. So it sounds very brutal. And you can use this technique today, and it's actually much more ethical than you might think. But I'll talk about that later.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want me to? I can share a screen that just
Yes,
show
share
very
a chart
quickly,
because
just a five
I think
minute.
it just so that people can actually understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, shall I give you? I need to make you co-host, don't I? Hang on a
Oh,
second.
right. Yeah. And then
Yeah,
I'll just share my
here you go.
screen.
You're co-host now.
So what I'm sharing here is you can think of a birth chart as being a bit like a laptop. So in order to run properly, it needs two things. It needs a power source and it needs an operator. And what happens is certain planets and points on the chart, they're indicators that this chart's got some power. And that qualifying planet or point is called the Hyleg. If the chart's got a Hyleg, the chart's got power, hasn't got a flat battery. And that means we'll have a look at how to determine the Hyleg in a minute. But in this particular chart, take my word for it that in this particular chart, the Hyleg is the ascendant that happens to be at 24 degrees of Gemini. So that's the Hyleg. This is the planet that says, yep, this chart's got some power. The
Is that
native
because
isn't
it's
going to die.
conjunct? Chris, is that because it's conjunct the North Node?
No, it's because what you do is I'll show you in a minute what the
Okay.
various rules are, but very quickly. But for now, just take my word for
Yeah.
it that it's the
Okay.
ascendant. There's only a set number of points that can be the high leg, the ascendant, the
Okay.
sun, the moon, and so on. So once you've identified the high leg, your laptop's got enough charge in it, you need somebody to operate it. And that's another planet, and that planet's called the Alcocoden or Alcocoden. And that's the planet that's got the most dignity in the place of the high leg. So that's a bit
Mm.
complicated to explain, but here we've got the high leg is in Gemini at 24 degrees, and Saturn in this chart. It doesn't matter that Saturn himself is dignified because he's in Aquarius, but actually Saturn quite likes air signs. He's got some dignity at 24 Aquarius. Um, the other planets and it's got to aspect it, the other planets aspecting the ascendant don't have huge amounts of dignity at 24 Gemini. So in this case, we say, well, actually, out of all the planets that aspect this ascendant, Saturn happens to be the strongest one. So Saturn's the one
Mm.
that says, right, I'm the one that's in charge here. I'm driving this chart. I'm the one that's going to give life. And how do we work out the high leg? Well, there's a whole series of things, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but you just do it in order. If the sun happens to be in the first, 10th, or 11th house, okay, you got your high leg, that's the sun. If not, try the moon and follow those rules. If not, try the ascendant. If not, try the part of fortune, and so on. If none of those work, the chart's got a flat battery. It's called a differential chart, and it basically means this kid isn't going to survive.
Okay, so that's fantastically well explained. That's made a lot of sense to me. And what I understood is the high, and this is where you can put me right. The high lag is either the sun or the moon, and it depending on what time you're born. So if you were born in the at night, it would be the moon that would be more likely to, well, depending where it was, isn't it? Really, actually, in the chart, if it's
Well,
above the horizon.
these rules that are on the screen tell
Yeah.
you, I mean, and they are different rules. I mean, I'm using the one that Bernadette uses, which she gets from
Okay.
Donati, but there's different formulae. The one I use, there are five candidates that could be the high leg: Sun, Moon, Ascendant, part of Fortune, or something called the previous syzygy, which is
Oh,
just a
funny.
fancy high scoring Scrabble word meaning the previous new moon or full moon.
Oh, okay.
But in this case, the sun wasn't in the first 10th or 11th. The moon didn't follow it, didn't obey this rule, so we dropped through to the ascendant, and this rule happened to work. I say I won't go into those, but
No.
this is you work your way through it, and as soon as you find one, okay, we got a high leg. Phew, thank goodness for that. The kid's going to survive.
So let me just jump in here. If you had the sun on one of the angles or the moon on one of the angles, would that automatically make it a high leg?
No, if the
No.
sun's in the first, 10th, or 11th, it's automatically the high leg. Or if it's
Okay.
in the seventh and it's a masculine sign, it is. But if it's in the fourth, no.
No. Okay. Okay. Okay.
So it's these rules on here that I use.
Okay.
And if none of those apply, you've got a flat battery, and that's called a differentia chart, which basically means they're all pretty miserable. Either the child won't take nourishment or is stillborn, or the child will take nourishment but won't last long, or there's no high leg. The child might grow up a bit, but not old enough to actually become a parent themselves. So uh,
Wow.
this is pretty grim stuff.
Well, it is, but in a way, it's quite useful, isn't it?
Well, can I give just two really quick examples?
Yes.
Because I think you might find this quite interesting and why this isn't the horrible methods that astrology schools say that it is. What you do is once you find out what the Alcocoden is, so in this case it's Saturn, you use this table to say, okay, well it's Saturn, so if Saturn's in good nick, that's going to give 57 years of life. If it's in okay condition, it will give 43 years of life. If it's not in good condition, it's only going to give 30 years of life.
Just before we go on, good
Mm.
condition, just talk me through a good condition, a medium condition, and a lesser condition.
Good condition would be being in rulership,
Yeah.
being having a nice trine or sextile to Jupiter or Venus, so that adds a bit as well.
Yeah.
Being angular, not being afflicted by Mars or Saturn, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
in that case, what they add extra bits as well. So you do a little calculation and then you come up with a length of life. So I just want to have a look at two really simple examples. So first of all, what we're going to do is there a high leg? Well, let's just look at the general condition of this chart. Normally, what gives power to a chart is the main luminary. And if we don't get much joy from the main luminary, the sun or the moon, we look for other parts of the chart that can help. So this is a day birth. The sun's above the horizon, so the sun's the main luminary. And where's the sun? It's in the eighth house of death. That
Yeah.
doesn't sound very good. Oh, and it's closely conjunct the south node. And the south node's got a bit of a bad rep in
Yeah.
medieval astrology as well. So, and it's got no dignity. The sun's not in rulership. Well, it looks like it's in
Okay.
Aries. It's not. It's in Pisces. So the sun's got no dignity there at all. So forget the sun. Okay, we'll try the chart ruler instead. It's Leo rising. Oh, that's no good because the chart ruler's the sun. We've just seen that the
Yeah.
sun's no good. Okay, how about the ruler of the sun? We're really scraping the barrel here. Well, Pisces, the ruler of Pisces, they didn't know about Neptune, so the ruler of Pisces is Jupiter. Oh, look, Jupiter's in fall in Capricorn. Okay, as a last resort, we look at the part of fortune. So, where's that? Well, it's more like the part of misfortune in this chart, right next to this damaged sun and the south node. So, basically,
Yeah.
nothing's got any dignity here. This is the second differential chart. This unfortunate child will not survive weaning. End of story. And
According to
we'll
medieval
revisit.
astrology.
Well, we'll revisit that in a minute
Yeah.
because the second example, this one, we go through all the rules. The sun's in the 12th. That can't be a high leg. These are both real people, by the way, and I'm going to tell you who they are in a
Oh,
moment.
okay. Okay.
In this second example, the sun's in the 12th house. Doesn't fit that first rule. Um, the moon, well, the moon's cadent in the third house, so that can't be the high leg. What about the ascendant? Do any of its rulers aspect the ascendant? And by ruler, I won't go into too much detail about dignity, but uh, we're talking about the ruler of a sign or the exaltation ruler or something called the triplicity ruler and the term ruler. But
Okay.
take my word for it that the ascendant rulers in this case could be Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, or Venus. None of them aspect the ascendant. Not looking good, is it? But now we look to
No.
the part of fortune, and in this case, its rulers are Mars, Moon, Venus, and the Sun. Mars actually aspects it. You can see that the ruler of the part of fortune is Mars, because
Hmm.
that's in Scorpio. Mars aspects it, so that's looking promising. So we do have a
And
high,
it's a sextile.
and it's a sextile.
Yeah, rather
So,
than a square.
so this particular native isn't going to die in childhood. Phew, we
Oh,
got there because there's a high leg. So we've got a tick down there.
oh, I
Yep, the part rulers are
see.
there. So now we can go right. We've got a high leg. What planets aspect this high leg, the part of fortune? Well, we've got Sun, Mars, and Mercury. Mars has definitely got some dignity.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark. Which planets have got dignity here at 10 Scorpio? Even though Mars isn't at 10 Scorpio, obviously Mars has got dignity at 10 Scorpio because he rules it. Mercury doesn't have any dignity there. The Sun doesn't have much. So Mars is the Alcocoden. He's the one that's giving life. So even though the
But
high
that's
leg
in Virgo, though, not that
it
doesn't.
doesn't matter, you see, because the high leg is the part of fortune,
Oh, I
and
see.
it's like which planet is strongest,
Yes, I get
would be
it.
strongest at 10
Yeah,
Scorpio? And the answer to that question is Mars.
yeah,
So it doesn't matter that Mars isn't in Scorpio, Mars
yeah.
is has got dignity there. So Mars is the one that's running the show.
So basically, this child is not going to even it is not going to die in
Yep.
childbirth and could live well up to 66 years plus.
Well, Mars is in reasonable condition.
Yeah.
Mars likes Earth signs, believe it or not.
Hmm.
Um, and we don't think of that in modern astrology, but Mars actually likes earth and water signs. And he's not cadent. He's not in bad. He's in pretty good condition. So we're going to get. That means he will probably give 66 years of life to this native. Now, if there was some malefics aspecting him by square or opposition, they're not. That would take some years away. If Jupiter or Venus were aspecting by trine or sextile, they're not. That would grant extra life. This is a simple one. This guy's going to
Yeah.
live to be 66. So let's see who these two charts belong to.
Yeah.
Well, this first one, this tragic, I'm going to skip over example three. This tragic first chart actually belongs to me. So this is my chart, and although the astrology says this child will not survive weaning, I am now fully weaned. But at the age of 2 weeks, I had an emergency operation for a condition called pyloric stenosis.
Oh,
Basically, I
yeah.
couldn't take nourishment, which is what the astrology says. My mother was told I had a 50-50 chance of survival, and this was in 1960. Now, obviously, I did survive, but what do you think my chances of survival would have been in medieval times?
None.
Well, the answer would be the child will not survive
Yeah.
weaning, and that
Yeah.
would have been true. So
Isn't
that's
that
why it's not
interesting?
necessarily a terrible thing to do because
Yeah.
you might say, look, your newborn baby, looking at the chart, if you notice anything awry, don't believe your GP if they say, oh, yeah, it's all right, the babies are often sick. No, do something about it. This could be critical. And it was only because my
Yes.
mum didn't believe the GP and took me to hospital that they said, oh, you should have brought him in a couple of days ago. It's really serious now. Our
Mm.
second example was somebody whose length of life was 66 years. And this is actually former President George W. Bush.
Huh.
Is still alive and well, and I don't know how old he is now, but he's more than 66. He
Getting
didn't,
on there.
he didn't die when he was 66. But a
Mm.
month after his 67th birthday, he was hospitalized because they found a clogged artery and he had to have a stent inserted into his heart and he was discharged the next day. It's a really routine procedure now, but it wasn't a really routine procedure in medieval times. He would have died at, well, 67 if he'd
Well,
been
isn't
alive in
that
medieval times.
interesting?
So that's how the
Mm.
technique can be used and why it isn't necessarily unethical. Because if you have a client and you do this and it's like, ooh, something's happening at the age of 66. They come to see you and they're 65. You say to them, okay, we're looking at things over the next year. You may have some health issues. Don't ignore them. If you've got
Yeah,
unexplained pains and so on,
yeah,
yeah, you might have had arthritis or something in the past and put it down to that, but please get it checked out because that could
yeah.
save their life. So it's not as unethical as it's
How
portrayed.
interesting. Yeah, but, I mean, there's a lot going. I know Judith Hild has done. She hasn't done so much what we've been talking about right now, but
Mm.
she's doing a lot looking at the South Node. Alison Bolton wrote a
Oh,
very interesting paper on the um, the influence of Mercury during
mm.
making aspects, difficult aspects. Most often, I think from her paper, what I can remember was to do with the progressed one. But I mean, and the South Node absolutely is
Mm.
normally quite strongly influenced. But as you say, I think, what would you like to say about ethics and astrology on this level?
Well, I think you've got to have what Bernadette always calls a good chart side manner. You don't want to say to your client, oh, well, good job you're not alive in medieval times, you'd be snuffing it next year. You need to be a little bit more circumspect and say, I can see some potential health issues in the chart, so don't ignore them because
Yeah,
astrology isn't fatalistic. I mean, people always think medieval astrology is fatalistic, but I cherry pick these examples. I can find other examples of people that should have died when they were 40 and didn't, and they're still alive at the age of 90. So,
yeah,
um, and there were different techniques even then that give different answers. And you could see, was Mars in good condition or mediocre? Well,
yeah.
it's a bit, yeah, I could choose one or I could choose the other. It's never black and white. And so I do think there are elements of free will as well. It's not fatalistic, but you could warn
Mm.
clients that there may be road bumps ahead. It doesn't mean you're going
Road
to die,
bumps.
but
Yes.
it does mean don't ignore any warning signs because this is a year when health could be a little bit fragile and you need to look
Yeah.
after yourself and do something about it.
Okay, what about the eighth house, which is traditionally known as the house of death?
Mm. Well, in medieval astrology, there are three houses that get a really bad rap: the sixth house, the eighth house, and the 12th house. And we always try and put a nice gloss on it in modern astrology. The sixth house is the house of health. Well, in medieval astrology, it was the house of illness. It was illness and slaves. And the slaves bit, hopefully, doesn't apply these days, but you can still have
Yeah.
employees or people that do the job that you don't enjoy doing, but you have to
Yeah.
pay the bills can be sixth house, but it can be illness as well. The house
Mm.
of health was the first, the body. So
Oh,
health was the
interesting.
first. And in fact, a really simple medieval rule, somebody came along for a horary and said, am I going to die? They'd say, well, let's have a look. The ruler of your first house, that's you, is pretty strong. The ruler of the sixth house, the sickness, is pretty weak. So you're going to overcome it and you'll be all right. If it's the other way around, no, sorry, the illness is stronger than you are. The illness is going to win. So the sixth house had a bad rap. The eighth house was the house of death, but it was also, the house of inheritances or
Mm.
other people's money. So your financial advisor is eighth house because she's looking after your money. Even if you're not, it's not to do with inheritances and it's not about you dying. It might be which investment should I do. So the eighth house is definitely isn't always bad, but its root meaning is the house of death. And the 12th, which still has a pretty bad rap in modern astrology, is the house of incarceration and confinement. Again, it can have a
Hospital.
positive thing. If you're thinking, should I enter a monastery?
Yeah.
Yeah, 12th house would be good for that and would have been in medieval times.
Well, it's very interesting, Chris, because a lot of clients that I have who's got Venus in the 12th house, they often have either a very strong memory of being in a monastery or a convent, very strong, and a very strong connection with their understanding of whatever God means to them. Yeah, or they are very drawn to the spiritual life. It's fascinating
Mm,
how often that comes up with Venus, particularly. And of course, Pluto is completely different, but
mm.
I often think that that's carrying trauma. There's some form of trauma in the unconscious. And it's often, in my experience talking to people, it's often a trauma concerned with birth. So,
Yes.
Yeah. Or
It's
their mum had
interesting
a difficult time, or they had a difficult time.
because I showed you my chart using medieval techniques saying crisis coming up. If you look at it in modern astrology, I've got Pluto in 4 degrees of Virgo, my ascendant's 29 Leo. So that's also saying Pluto is mucking about there on the ascendant, on my life force. So using
Yeah.
modern astrology gives the same answer. I often say that astrology is the universe talking to us and it speaks in lots of different
Yes.
languages, but gives the same message. Whether you use medieval or Vedic or modern or what have
Yeah.
you, they all work.
The interesting thing is, Chris, my eldest son had a pyloric stenosis, and I couldn't get anyone to take it seriously. And
Mm,
finally, he projectile vomited in front of a doctor, and the doctor went, "Oh my God." And it was right across the room. And I guess you'd have been doing the same thing. And
mm.
he has Pluto in his 12th house. So
Well,
he would have
well,
died.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Isn't that
it
interesting?
definitely is. Talking of
Mm.
the 12th house, though, it's amazing how many politicians have Sun in the 12th house.
Yes.
And in a way, if you think about what it looks like visually, the darkest hour of the day is just before sunrise, they always say, and it is quite dark. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the sun bursts over the horizon and it's light. Well, when that happens, the sun's in the 12th house. It's weird that we think of the 12th house as hidden because as soon as things come into the 12th house, they're
Yes.
actually visible. So it's weird, isn't it, that the 12th
Well,
house has this hidden
and also
element to it.
entrepreneurs. There's a lot of entrepreneur. I think
Mm.
what's his name? Virgin Atlantic. Oh,
Oh, Richard Branson.
yeah. I think he's got a 12th house sun. I think I'm pretty sure he has. Because
Mm.
normally you think, oh well, you can associate with dad not being present, or hiding your light behind under a bushel, or
Mm.
absolutely not. I couldn't agree with you more. It's very strange.
Mm.
And maybe we need to think about redefining the 12th house as well in modern astrology.
Yes, yeah.
That would
I
be
mean, I like
interesting.
Bernadette's approach to medieval astrology because she takes all these, she says, think about it, medieval astrology looks like it's really right wing, it's racist, it's sexist, it's everything else. She said that's because society was. And in
Yeah.
fact, what we need to do is adapt that. So, third house is supposed to be siblings. Well, a lot of us don't have siblings these days because we have smaller families. But office politics, well, maybe the 10th house, maybe the king or queen is like your boss. The third house are like your colleagues, they're your siblings
Yes.
in a work
Yes.
situation.
Yes. And also, I think it's how you learn to communicate with other people as a child. It isn't with your parents or your siblings are the first, or your friends at school, kindergarten, are the first time you have interactions. And
Mm,
that's very third house, isn't it? I always think.
absolutely.
And when I go to Tai Chi, I walk past a kindergarten school and they're all out playing. And I think, oh, they're all doing their third house stuff here, learning how to communicate with each other. And some are
Yes.
standing in the corner and going moo, and others are kind of like, they're doing all. It's so interesting, isn't it? Oh my
I
God.
think I think the other criticism of medieval astrology is that it uses very loaded terms like in detriment, in fall, and things like that,
Yes.
malefic. But actually, again, I like Bernadette's approach to this. She said, imagine that you are the only person in your medieval village who's got a different religion to everybody else where you're going to be drummed out of town at best, burnt at the stake at worst. So you had to conform. If you didn't conform, that
Yeah.
was it. So she said, for example, Mercury in Gemini, you'll be a writer, a scholar, you're conforming, and that's great. And she said, I've got Mercury in Pisces. I have as well, actually, but Bernadette's got it, and she said, "So, does that mean that it's in detriment and fall? Does that mean I can't write? No, I've written loads of books." But she said, "I do something socially disgraceful. If I had Mercury in Virgo, maybe I'd be an advisor to the monarch, but I haven't. I've got it.
Yes.
I've got it in there, so I do something socially disgraceful. I write astrology books."
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
said the whole point about detriment and fall is dare to be different. You couldn't afford to do that in medieval times, but you can now. So if you've got a planet in
Mm.
detriment or fall, let it dance to a different tune. Don't say Venus is all about conventional marriage, so get married. Saturn's all about
Yes.
being a boss, so do that. No, if you've got Saturn in fall or Venus in fall, got Venus in fall, you might not want a conventional marriage. You
Well,
might want something different, but it's
it's
still
interesting.
fulfilling.
Yeah. I've got Venus in Aries at 0 degrees,
Mm.
funny enough, 0 degrees Aries. So it's been an interesting time for me just recently. And of course, it for me that's the warrior queen, well, the warrior
Mm.
woman,
Yeah,
doesn't
absolutely.
want to get married actually, is very happy doing her own thing.
Mm.
And I think we forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah, or yeah, I think a lot of astrology is being reconfigured at the moment, isn't it? Through all this, I mean, it's just been phenomenal. The impact of astrology on people's lives since COVID, really.
Mm.
It was
Mm.
beginning, wasn't it? And then boom, everybody wanted to learn it. So it's just a fascinating, it's such a, I always think now astrologers are at the front line. We're frontline responders now.
Mm.
The people who don't trust the traditional way of doing, don't trust necessarily their doctor, certainly don't trust the church or what they're being told or the news or anything like that. And they're coming to astrologers.
Mm.
Tell me who I am. I don't know. I'm
I'm
getting that with 70-year-old people who've just going, I don't know who I am. I'm going to die soon. Help me.
I'm heartened by the fact that it's been so long lasting as well, because Bernard Eccles wrote a paper in the late 90s about how astrology was dying out.
Yeah,
And I felt that when I went to my first astrology conference in 2002, my first AAA conference. I was 42 and I was one of the youngest people there. And I thought, so where are the astrologers of the future? Our art is dying. And Bernard actually published his, I think he did his MA dissertation on it, about how astrology was going to die out. And then the millennials came along and were
yeah,
suddenly into it. And it
yeah,
was like, might be a flash in the pan, but no, the Gen X and Gen Z
yeah,
are all into it. So this has now been going on for over a quarter of a century with the interest
yes,
not dying away at all. And I think that's really positive because I
yes,
know a lot of people, astrologers my age, say, yeah, but it's all so superficial. They're not into it seriously and they don't study it properly. It's all very, um, you know, spontaneous. Well, not spontaneous. It's, oh, I just want to do dabble in it and then pretend I'm an expert. But come on, we all started out that way. I started out, oh, I'm a Pisces. That means I can only ever find true love with a Scorpio or a Cancer because I'm a water sign. And then you realize that there's more to it. And if you've got 100 million young people interested in astrology on a very superficial level, then you've got maybe 1 million will go on to take it further. Tens of
yeah,
thousands will go on to become serious astrologers, and that's
yeah,
the future astrologers. So I
yeah,
think it's really
absolutely.
positive.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think that I think that, yeah. I had a conversation with Mark Jacobs about astrology and ethics, and we were talking about this, and because he's a psychotherapist,
Mm,
and so am I. Actually, I come from that, and I'm really glad I've got that background because. In my experience, we are frontline responders too, and some people come with a lot of trauma, and it's
mm,
knowing I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm an astrologer, and I'm very clear about my
mm,
role. But I do have people that I can pass people onto if they need
mm,
help and advice. And I think all of this probably will start to come more into the fore as
mm,
astrology continues to become very mainstream in people's understanding of psychology.
absolutely.
Yeah. Chris, is there anything else that you'd like to say about? Oh, yes, I just wanted to ask you about in those days, the medieval days, the eclipses and the comets, because they played a huge role in medieval history.
Mm,
But also, I did, this is what I learned just recently that Halley's Comet was seen in 1066
indeed,
and
yeah.
I didn't realize that had come at the time of the Norman conquest. So
Mm.
do you want to say something very quickly about that before we wrap up?
Well, in medieval times, they thought that comets were sublunary. In other words, they were meteorological phenomena rather than astrological. So comets they didn't know that you could predict comets. I mean, we know that Halley's comet returns every 76 years, I think. They didn't know that at the time. These were just omens that came along. And strangely enough, we've got one next week, a comet that might be visible if we get clear
Yes, so I've
skies.
heard.
So eclipses, of course, are predictable and were predictable, and there were big arguments about whether eclipses were relevant if you couldn't see them. Uh, William
Mm,
Lilly refer in much later in the 1600s referred to this eclipse, and he was widely criticised by another astrologer for this is ridiculous because you can't see this
see
eclipse in
it, can't see
England.
it, can't.
Well, we hardly ever see eclipses in England, actually. I mean, that one we had in '99 was the last one. The next one will
Yeah.
be, in decades and decades' time.
And I
So
think
yeah, they were taken seriously.
they normally also most often happen over the ocean, don't they?
Yeah,
So they would never have seen them. They don't necessarily happen over land. It's
no,
fascinating, isn't it?
I mean we
Yeah.
do get two a year, at least two
Yeah.
a year, but
Yeah.
yeah, the being able to be in the path of them is quite unusual.
I remember sitting there watching it happen in 2000. Yeah, it was just extraordinary. Yeah.
I went to Cornwall because for the '99 eclipse that was total
It
in
was
Cornwall,
99. Yeah,
but
99. Yeah.
um, unfortunately, it was cloudy where I was. Some
Oh,
friends of mine went to northern France and it was cloudy there, but they could see a sunny patch in the distance, drove down
yeah.
and got the full works, the Bailey's beads, the total eclipse, and everything. So
Uh,
I'm really jealous because I'd love to see an eclipse, but
well, I saw it, the whole place went dark.
it
I
did,
was
didn't it?
exhausted. It
Yes.
was extraordinary,
Mm.
absolutely extraordinary. Chris, thank you so much. I have learnt tons from you today. That's
Well,
the
thank you for
glory of
inviting me, Sue. It's been lovely having a chat.
that's absolutely brilliant. So, yes, I'll put Chris's information down below the video. And if you please leave comments or anything that you feel you'd like to pass on to either of us, we'll be thrilled to hear from you. And for now, thanks for listening. See you later.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks for
Bye
everything.
for now.